Hello, and welcome back to Around the Counter with Molly and Friends. I'm Molly Jones, and this is a podcast for people who care about Utah politics. With me today is N Canada of the Wasatch Assembly. Through the Wasatch Assembly, they attended city council meetings for years to understand how local government could be weaponized against oppressive systems and help the material conditions of the community. Over that time, they achieved significant policy victories at Salt Lake City Council. Welcome Around the Counter, N.
Hi Molly, how are you doing?
I'm so good. How are you?
Doing good.
I will be honest with you, I am extremely excited for a little bit of rain in the forecast. I've been feeling
Oh,
like I'm baking, and I'm not really like a hot weather girly, so this is fun. Ooh.
it is really hot.
It's been so interesting, thinking about the summer and the heat and everything. And I'm just like, man, I generally hope that the like supercharged El Nino or whatever that's coming towards us
Mm,
brings some significant water this year because I'm very dry.
yes,
Awesome. So I want to kind of jump in to both feet first, if you're interested in that.
of course.
So Tucker Carlson,
hmm
Michigan Senate candidate Abdul El Sayed, and you all share a similar opinion, which, breaking news, that's kind of shocking.
hmm
And it's that Israel is a bad actor. So do you think you can explain why Israel is acting in bad faith?
Well, I think bad faith is a bit soft. I think committing a genocide is abhorrent. So, um, Israel is Israel's an entity that is supporting the expulsion of the Palestinians. And I'm actually a quarter Palestinian myself. My grandfather fled in 1948 during the Nakba, which was the mass expulsion by the Israelis in the region. So my grandfather fled to Jordan and was displaced from his home. So the reason I always joke, the reason I exist is from three different genocides or ethnic cleansing: the Irish, the West African, and the Palestinian. So all of these stories have a commonality, which is a group of people coming in, whether it be the British or the European American or the Israeli, and displacing people. So um, I think what the American populace at large, the Democratic Party, I think it's something like 70 or 80% agree that we shouldn't be supporting Israel anymore. I think people are becoming aware that the foundation of Israel is rotted, that it's not just bad faith or bad actor, but the premise of the state is incompatible with human rights, incompatible with justice and freedom, incompatible with caring for the populace in the region.
That's a pretty um It's that's actually a really intense background. Like I didn't realize that you came from so many different struggles. That's
Yeah.
how do you think that that's like how do you think that's shaped who you are growing up and how you're operating today? Because I don't think people who come from such turmoil it's not easy.
Yeah, well, I think I'm thankful because, one of the big centers of my work throughout my life has been comparing and contrasting. And when I look at European Americans or the white populace in the United States, I think there's actually a disconnection from self there. And what I'm thankful for is I am very connected with where I'm from and what my ancestors have been through. And that informs my present. And I think that's cultural perpetuity. I think that is gives me a through line of understanding, like, what is the purpose of my life? Why am I here? What am I doing? And what do I need to stand for? Right. And all of my lineages, again, I don't have an Irish family member. It's like way, way back. But you know, what my blackness in particular has shown me is that I need to build a better world. So even if I wasn't Palestinian, the US is funding Israel. It's not like, I know there's many other genocides going on, but we're complicit in this one. And I think that that changes our responsibility as Americans to actually resist our tax dollars going to cruelty abroad. And I don't think the United States has been good at that, or the electorate has been good at that historically, but I think There's always room for change.
Yeah. I'm interested here. You said that we're not complicit in some of the other ongoing wars, right? And so I do think that it's important to note that what is happening in Palestine, Israel, Gaza, that is not exclusively the only horrors that are happening in the world, right?
Mhm.
We have, violence, mass displacement, and ethnic cleansing happening across Sudan. You
Mhm.
have systemic violence in the Democratic Republic of Congo. You've got lots of military activity happening in Myanmar, the forced internments of Uyghur Muslims in China. And then there's just ongoing disruptions, violence in Syria, Lebanon, and also Yemen. And so when I think about how we should be prioritizing what we do as a global entity, the US as the, single hegemonic power,
Mhm.
I wonder if focusing so intently on one particular place like Israel, Gaza, Palestine is the best use of our efforts, or if we need to be thinking more globally. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think that, again, to my earlier point, you listed those things. A lot of those things, I mean, the US is connected to many destabilizing efforts across the world, right? I think that's common knowledge. At least I think it should be common knowledge that we've
Absolutely.
operated
And
through.
and historically, right?
Right.
Like we have meddled in foreign governments. I
Totally.
mean, you can even look this year. We've seized the Venezuelan president
Right.
directly from his seat of power, and is that also considered like violence by your internal metric?
Yeah, I mean, I think that destabilizing a government is never really going to help. Like my internal conception, because I'm just imagining if I'm in a place that's already struggling, if you destroy any semblance of structure, people are going to struggle more. But I think in many of the ones you listed, the US, I think I won't say that we're not related at all to why what's going on is going on, but we are not directly funding and aiding and abetting the entity that is mass killing, that is creating an apartheid state. We're not as involved. So while I do think we should have an international consciousness around, hey, we should try to make the world a better place. I don't think that's what's happening with the Palestinian genocide and with the Israeli project. Like, I think that that is actually us making the world worse. So I think that we need to understand when we're supporting things internationally, what we're supporting and why we're supporting it. So if we're going to support, you know, Sudan, which I think we should, again, we need to be very careful about, well, what are we putting the money to, right? Is it just aid? Are we trying to support a political movement there? I just think it gets so dubious when we take the autonomy of the local population, whether that be here or abroad, away, right?
So why is Israel, Gaza, Palestine, why is that different for you? I mean, you've kind of skirted around it, but I think that
Different
there's like
than
a
what?
well, so like you've been talking, I really appreciate the nuance we're picking out here for the record. And I think that what I'm struggling to understand is there's violence, there's displacement, there's war, there's genocide happening in other countries.
Mhm,
And what I think I'm hearing from you is the US is one of the root causes in Israel. And I'm
mhm,
wondering if you can tell us how you think that, because I
mhm,
think that there is a reasonable argument to be made that the US has done things like fund weapons for Sudan, which are now being used against the population. And how does that stack up in your internal metric
mhm.
against the types of ongoing violence in Israel and
Yeah, I
Palestine?
think it's scale. So, I agree with you. So again, I'm not an expert in Sudan, not an expert in Congo. So I want to make that clear that I don't know the level of US intervention in those places. So, I'll take what you said as just the truth that like, we have funded weapons in Sudan and that, has caused some, violence, genocide, destabilization. Um, Great. I accept that. And also, we've funded Israel over 50 years with hundreds of billions of dollars, right? So I think the difference is the scale and the breadth, and also um, the fundamental issue with Israel is it's a lot of people from outside of the region. This is like going back to 48. doing a settler colonial project. So the foundation of Israel is different than Sudan, right? In Sudan, it's an um, intercultural conflict. It's like people who are there fighting, right? But Israel, it was created by European and US power, propped up. What happened in the Nakba was allowed by Europe and America. And
Can you
we
explain the
continue
Nakba?
to the
Sorry.
Nakba.
Yeah, I'm not sure I know what that is.
The Nakba is in 48, where Palestinians were mass expelled and killed in Palestine. So like a lot of people fled because Israel was basically like, expelling because they wanted a Jewish majority, which was not feasible unless they did an expulsion. So the idea of a Jewish state is predicated upon mass expulsion and displacement because, similar to the United States, right? If some people want the United States to be a white country, if you want a white country, what do you have to do to make it more white? So like, it's like, and that was early colonists wanted a white country. So what did they do? Killed indigenous people. So like, it's not, or expelled them, Trail of Tears. So like, I think what's interesting actually about Israel is Israel mirrors early US creation. It mirrors what we did here. And I think there's a level of spiritual um dissonance and conflict with, especially the white population in the United States, because if we accept what Israel is doing is wrong and immoral and unjust, then we also have to look in the mirror a bit and say, well, was the creation of the US and how we did that immoral and unjust, and what does that mean for us now? Because you know, we've created the reservations, we've completed that project that Israel has yet to complete. So my question, I think, to everybody is, what is our duty now that we know that this is going on? We see the images, we see the horror. Do we just say, yeah, let Israel finish the job? Or do people's lives matter?
Okay, so that's interesting. I think then you've taken that very question, and since December of 2023, you have galvanized members of the community, and your coalition has made the war in Gaza a primary focal point of protests, rallies, and local pressure campaigns against the Salt Lake City Council.
Hmm.
And I think that it's very interesting. So, from an organizational standpoint, I think you've seen quite some success. You were able to get some, uh, like a resolution passed at the city council,
Yeah.
and so I'm curious. I want to unpack some of that.
Mm.
Why do you think, from an organizational standpoint, that Palestine has resonated so deeply with the Utah's progressive base right now to achieve to achieve what you've managed to do?
Yeah, I think it goes back to that spiritual question within whiteness, right? Like we have sins in this country. It's undeniable. And people who pretend that the US is like some benevolent place that's never done any wrong, I think is just a historical and a bit reductive, right? Not saying it's all bad, but it can't be all good. So I think that, especially because Utah is a predominantly white state, I think that it's resonated because what has happened there, what is happening and has been happening in Palestine, I think is a second chance for us to be better. A lot of us who are, a lot of European Americans in modernity nowadays, like they didn't have necessarily a direct hand in indigenous genocide or a direct hand in US slavery. But of course, the systems continue and are upheld in different ways. But it's a chance to say, no, if I was at that time, I would have stood against, right? It's too late in some ways now, but there's this thing that we are connected to, we are funding, we are aiding and abetting. Let's be different this time, right? Let's support the indigenous population this time. And let's be who we say we are, freedom and justice for all.
And you think that
Um,
that's especially important because the United States has invested so many billions of dollars over the years,
I don't
that
even,
you
maybe
feel
it's
like
even
it's
trillions. I don't know actually.
but you feel like that's the impetus here that differentiates between other sorts of global injustices is
Right.
we have propped it up, we have lots of money invested into it, and so that's
Yeah.
the really important piece.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, yeah, it's like and I think also the ubiquity in U.S. politics, right? It's not just like, oh yeah, something over there. It's like if you like, I remember I grew up in a time where if you said you're anti-Zionist, like you were, I was rid because I've been in this game for a long time, so I was talking about Palestine, free Palestine in like 2013, right? And I was crucified, right? People were so cruel to me. And I felt vindicated then, but I feel even more vindicated now that I was correct. But you know, it's one of those things where like the US political system has refused to take the criticism of Israel, right? It's like been, and you've seen it in local and like, political races across the country, locally too, like when you say you're against Israel, all this money floods in. And that can't be, oh, Israel's not a big deal to whoever it is, right? So it is like just economically, foundationally, politically so core to what the US is currently. And it seems that a severing of that tie is catastrophic for the current political zeitgeist, at least the establishment one. And I think that can't be ignored, right? If someone says Sudan, it's like, whatever, whatever, whatever. But if someone says I'm against Israel, it's like, whoa, 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 you can't be that.
And do you think that is the reason why you've had such success amongst the progressive base here in Utah?
Yeah,
Those
I mean, because it's counter-establishment, right? The establishment is Zionist, right? So if you are anti-Zionist, you are essentially going against the establishment zeitgeist. You are, and I think that it's resonated for that reason, but I think it's resonated because the U.S., at least in my lifetime, we have been doing like I'm 31. We've been doing these forever war, bombing people abroad, and I think there's a level of exhaustion, right? And again, boohoo us, right? Over here with no bombs being fallen on our heads. But, I think there is a level of, can we just do something good for once, right? Can we just support people around the world like we say we want to do? Can we just like help somebody instead of saying, I'm going to like bomb Iran and Afghanistan and kill millions of people? Like it gets to a point where I'm like, and I think I imagine people during the time of the Vietnam War felt similarly, the anti-war movement there. It just gets to a point where you're like, geez, all this money for what?
That's interesting. So you did achieve some successes at the Salt Lake City Council, and I was hoping you could
Sure.
start us back in December of 2023 and walk us through
Sure.
what your group did, what they were asking for, and what kind of achievements you made.
Yeah, so this predates the Wasatch Assembly. The Wasatch Assembly was officially founded this year, but at
Oh
that
my gosh,
time,
congrats. That's so big. I didn't realize that.
yeah, yeah. So we're just getting started.
Oh,
But it was born out of the municipal organizing I was doing. And I actually got a lot of flack from local organizers for engaging in the municipal political system because people said, why are you doing that? That's not valid. Like, you need to stop. And I felt that if we don't understand the system, how can we hope to be better than it? Right. And when I say understand, I don't mean love it, appreciate it, care about it, but I mean like, what are the idiosyncrasies? How does city council work? What are the ins and outs? What does city council even do? Right. A lot of people go to city council, say, hey, I want you to do this. And it's like, babes, they can't do that. That's the state, or that's the federal government, or that's the county. Right. Um, so me and a local organizer, who does healthcare workers for Palestine, we were like, in my the town I lived in before Salt Lake, or before living in Utah, which is Somerville, I saw a lot of local movements of passing ceasefires for Palestine. So municipal government saying, we don't stand for this. We want to see a free Palestine. And I felt that it was important for me to bring that movement here. And And I think that a lot of people like lobbied critique at me saying, well, what can they do? They can't stop the war. And a lot of city councilors said that to me, but I think it missed the point, right? I'm not stupid. I know that city council can't stop the bombs from being dropped from Israel to Palestine or from us from, supporting Israel on at least the municipal level. But I think people underestimate the power of building a community, building a movement, and building a culture, right? Where do you think politics comes from? It comes from us. And if we get a group of people together who care about an issue and we build a platform, how do you think the Republicans overturned Roe v. Wade? Over 50 years of getting together, building something. And again, I don't love it, right? I dislike it, but I understand and appreciate the level of commitment it took to do 50 years of movement building to eventually get something overturned that you despised.
I mean, game knows game kind of vibe.
Right. So I think that like people perceive me as a rabble rouser. I mean, some of the city councils call me a terrorist, right? For just coming at city council and commenting, right? Wow, what a terroristic act. But I think what it exposed was, what culture is Salt Lake City Council promoting? What are they pushing forward? And like, I think in this time we see politicians like Mamdani and the DC socialist mayor who won, and a lot of socialist victories in Michigan and Minnesota as well. Like, people are wanting somebody. It's not even about socialism, right? Whatever. I don't identify that with that word. I don't identify with any of the European economic or political models, but like, can we authentically speak to how people are struggling? Can we authentically speak to how maybe we shouldn't be funding a genocide and maybe what we're seeing is bad? And I think the anger and the fever pitch that happened was people went to city council expecting some reception, but it was met with,
Not only just a closing of silence, but you also, if I understand the history correctly, at the time, Council Chair Victoria Petro actually removed and severely limited the
correct.
amount of public comment that was allowed to
Still
happen.
to
Is
this
that
day,
correct?
they've limited it. So because of what we did, because there were so many people who came out, like it was one of the longest city council meetings, I think, in like recent history, where it went to like 1 or 2 a.m. And then we had like kind of rally outside afterwards, or like impromptu rally where they literally like, they shut down the building and like city council was like crying inside. It was like 10 of us, right? And it's one of those
You
things,
had city council members inside crying?
bro. So
Who?
and they had like
Who?
a billion, like it was probably 100 police. I don't know. I'm exaggerating with the police thing, but there was like so many police. They shut all the lights off in the building. Like they truly thought like we were going to like, I don't know, cause like do them violence. And we were literally with our little signs. There's maybe 15, 20 of us. And what that taught me and what that showed me was there is no cultural leadership, right? If you can't even contend with a few, again, it's every other week, right? City council public comment. You can't contend with this many people showing up and yelling at you and telling about how you care about something. You can't even make a comment to these people. You can't even engage with these people. And then what they did do, though, is all the Zionists who came, the handful that did from local community, they met with them, they shook their hands. They said, I'm so sorry these people are being so cruel to you. And it's like, hello? Right?
So wait, I'm not sure I understand. So what I think you're saying here is that there were people who were not part of your coalition, not part of your group, who
correct.
were approaching city council and the mayor and saying that your group, which was just at this time was just a loose coalition of people who wanted to be heard about Israel and Palestine and the horrors happening there.
Right.
And this, external, I guess like this, the opposite coalition
Yeah, the
was
opposition.
coming to city council and saying, this group is treating you poorly. Is that correct?
Yeah, they were saying that like, they're brutalizing us, right? And the city councilors like, after they can, they're right there, and then you kind of leave, and then the people who are self-identified Zionists would go up, they would shake their hand, they would hug them, and I think what it showed us was these people don't care about what we're saying, and again, like, and I don't think I'm naive, like they can believe what they want as city councilors, right? But I think what it highlights is within this representational democracy, what level of dissent, what level do we have to get to before the system says, I see that this is important to a lot of people. We're gonna talk about this. We're gonna have a forum about this. We're gonna dig into this, understand how we can help alleviate this tension. And I think what I identify within our own democracy is that there are no levers, right? And I was called a terrorist by people who now I text. So it's a very interesting thing. And again, public comment is limited because of what I did and my friend did. And they've never reversed that. And the reason I did public comment is I realized it was the one lever of pressure we had. It exhausts city staff, it exhausts the city councilors who are part-time, technically, and it's not fun to listen to people berate you for 6 hours.
But isn't that the job?
I agree with you, Molly. I believe that is the job, and I think that they were being pathetic.
I don't know if I want to call them pathetic, but I do think that it's very interesting to me that when I was watching it, I was watching this whole saga happen from afar and just reading the news articles and things. And I remember thinking at the time, like, you're stopping public comment because it's happening for a long time because your citizens are coming out. And I actually thought that was a strategic error because, where I learned to do politics was in Berkeley, California. I was the senior director of public policy in the mayor's office there. And it was routine for our meetings to end at 2 a.m. And so from my perspective, the way that I learned to do politics was very, very community centric. And so watching you guys come out and talk about this, I thought, I'm home again. And then watching the response to that being to shut down, to limit, to restrict, I think that was an interesting control mechanism. And to me, it indicated that there was uncomfortableness, perhaps, within the city council members in a way that I hadn't seen before. What do you think of that? Does that align with what you thought your experience was, especially since you now say that you've been communicating with them and talking to them? Like, do you think that you pushed them in a positive way?
I think there has been dividends. Again, it's hard to because I'm a scientist at heart. It's hard to quantify, right? But I feel like, in my heart, I feel that there has been a shift. I think that there has been movement. I think
Is that also because there's new council members who have different viewpoints?
Well, when I was doing this, everyone was the same except for Ava. So I do think there has been a tonal shift. I think that they have learned that, one of the big things that has been different is that they will actually comment to the public after public comment. Right before that was apparently I don't know why
they weren't doing that.
No, they viewed it as biased or something. They viewed it well, if we comment, then that means we're showing bias, and it's yeah, but you are biased. We all have our opinions, right? So.
And how do you lead if you're not stating your claims and your opinions and your beliefs? I mean, I think that's something that I have, that I struggle with personally, because I'm I don't want you to be a blank slate. Right. I elect you because I want you to achieve X, Y, and Z. And if I don't know what those are, it's hard for me to support and back what you're doing.
But I think that's the tactic, right? It's in being inert is tactically advantageous, I think, for them to not have to do much, right? Because if you're inert, then well, where do you go? What do you believe? Unless you're going I was every single week for years, you don't really understand what they believe. And I think that's tactical. So for me now, I'm the type of person where I keep it pushing, right? So despite them doing all these cruel things to me, my desire is for working Utahns, and not just in Utah, but people across the country, people across the world, to be okay. So I wouldn't be living my values if I said, oh, I hate them, oh, it's over, whatever. There's many who I don't love, I wouldn't be necessarily friends with, but there's a requirement here to show up. And I think that is leadership. And I think, so for instance, my city councilor I live in District 2, and my representative is Alejandro Puy. He refuses to meet with me to this day. I've asked him to his face, "Hey, I'm your constituent. Can we meet?" He says, "No, get away from me." So
Why do you think he doesn't want to meet with you?
I think I'm a threat to him.
How are you a threat to him?
I think that I think that I am a foil. I think that I expose that you don't have to be that way. And also, I'm willing to meet with him. He's not willing to meet with me. And I want to work to make people's lives better. I don't know if he wants to do that. So I think that, like, because a lot of people said maybe you should run for District 2 and maybe you should run. And that's not necessarily my aspiration. But I think that he is like, I think that there's two pieces. I think that he just doesn't like me. And the other piece is, I think if I get in proximity to him, I have a way of like moving people because I'm persistent, right? When you have a person who's always showing up and always wants to talk to you, you start to, it starts to seep into your heart a bit. And it starts to be hard to be like, well, this person's crazy. Because you listen and you're like, well, maybe oh, actually, that was a good point. So I
I
think
think you've described all like my entire theory of how you get things done at the city council level, which is show up consistently, be polite, be persistent, state your claims very forthright.
yeah. Yeah.
That's cool.
So anyway, so, I think that city council and, the ceasefire for Palestine movement, you know, was ultimately a failure in the sense that we didn't get what we wanted, right? We didn't get the resolution we wanted. We didn't get a ceasefire for Palestine. But I think that as a scientist, sometimes an experiment doesn't have to lead in success to learn something. And I think that moment catalyzed what you see happening today. A lot of the organizations that exist now did not exist. And it has built a local movement of people who want to free Palestine and people who understand our local material conditions in Palestine. They understand that if we care about people abroad, we care about us here, right? The empathy is not walled. And once your heart expands to loving everybody, right, and wanting everybody to have peace, all of a sudden it shifts. Well, what about here? Do we deserve peace? Do we want freedom and justice? And what does it mean for Salt Lake? And it starts to ask questions not only about the international, but also the local.
You actually took that local feeling, that local coalition, and you created the Wasatch Assembly, which we were
Mm,
talking about earlier, which was
mhm,
happened this year. And you have described the Wasatch Assembly as a movement using a year-round three-phase cycle.
mhm.
The Strategic Assembly, the Policy Assembly, and the Action Assembly, all of it powered by ranked choice voting to set your platform. So I want to take a minute and unpack some of that. For
Mm.
a busy mom or a suburban neighbor who's sitting at her kitchen counter who has never heard of a community assembly and is kind of confused about what ranked choice voting is, can you explain how the Wasatch Assembly works?
Sure. So the three assemblies are actually situated that way in terms of engagement level. So the Strategic Assembly is one day for 2 hours. We list all of our policy areas. So let's like housing or environment or, you know, governmental corruption or whatever the policy area is. We write all those out. We create a giant list. All ranked choice voting is okay, instead of having a first cross the post, like we're all going to vote for our favorite one and whichever one has the most votes wins. You start, instead of saying the favorite, you say, actually, here's my top 5 most important policy areas. So, my most important is the environment, but, I also really care about housing. And then my third is I really care about immigration. I hate what's happening with ICE. And my fourth is ensuring that we have enough water, right, in the valley, and so forth. And then everyone does that for I think we had like 25 policy areas, and everyone did that. And the top 3 that we went with this year were housing, immigration, and environment. So if we just did regular voting, right, with just like 50% across the post, then we would miss that data on, well, what else is important? right? It can't just be one thing's the most important. I think that's the issue with just, the regular voting we have or just the type of voting we have first across the post because you lose data. So another good example is like, if you really care about something, but it's not what everyone else cares about, then you're going to be silent. But ranked choice voting allows you to say, well, actually, no, my top issue, and let's say my top issue is I really want more transportation modes in Utah, right? That's my top thing. I know everyone thinks there's more important things, but that's my top thing. You in ranked choice voting in Wasatch Assembly, you can name that desire. Maybe other people agree, maybe they don't. And then if that doesn't happen, then your second most important desire. And then it helps us find cross community alignment and say, okay, we might not all agree on the top thing. Maybe we agree on the third thing, right? Maybe we all agree that immigration is really important and we should focus on that.
And do you think that because you realign your priorities every year, that allows opportunities for people to say, hey,
Correct.
immigration was my top priority yesterday or
Right.
last year. It didn't get done this year, and now I'm ready for it to be top this year. And then you can advocate for and, form your own mini coalition within the coalition.
100%. So, but I think that is just human, right? Like, we change and we grow and we think different things and we're like, wow, that was important to me last year. This year, I do not care, right? And I want people to be human in that way. And the assembly is just a fancy name for we just get together. Like, it's not that serious. So
That's cute.
So I think that is what, if I would explain it, it's not super, super complicated. It's just a way to make sure that all our voices are heard in a way that I think our current democratic institutions do not allow for. I would actually note on that, a lot of local municipal races in Salt Lake or in Utah do have ranked choice voting. So just want to correct there.
Yeah, you cut me off there. I was about to be like, well, doesn't Salt Lake City have ranked choice voting
Yeah,
on municipal elections? So that's great. So I want to dig into what your 2026 policy agenda actually is.
totally.
It looks to me like your top housing priorities include ending homelessness sweeps,
Hmm.
enacting Salt Lake City's expanding housing options plan,
Hmm.
banning real page algorithmic rent pricing, giving $1,000 monthly stipend to unhoused individuals, and it looks like increasing property tax to build at cost and low rent apartment and support for the homeless population. Did I get everything right, or
So
do
the
we need
top
some
part of
tweaks
this,
there?
the top part. So when we do the policy assembly, that's where we create the policies. The top, and then, so, just in the spirit of prioritization, we will rank the policies as well. So that's a way to say, hey, we most people said they wanted this policy area, and now we created the details. Let's make sure those are prioritized as well. So the top one is no homelessness sweeps, and that was voted on by the Wasatch Assembly, about 30 to 40 people. The second one was Salt Lake City's expanding housing options plan, like you said. And the third one was the property tax for affordable housing and homelessness services. So the other two were that you mentioned were all the in the policies, but those weren't the top most important. In how the Washington Assembly works, when we go to City Council, we send them a survey, and it's a weighted survey based on the priority. So the priorities are weighted more, the other policy weighted less. It's not meaning they're not important, but if we were trying to push for those top three, and if they don't agree with any of those, then of course we'll go to the other ones.
And so when you talk about weighting a poll,
Hmm.
what that essentially means is you're saying so I'm council member A and
Hmm.
I'm responding to your poll and I say, okay, I think that no homelessness sweeps is my number 12 priority and expanding the housing plan is my number 1 priority, but I really care about bringing a farmer's market to Sugar House Park. You
Hmm.
would say the first two are weighted at 1.5, whereas the third one that I mentioned would be maybe a 0.5, and that would just decrease it. Is that how you weight, or is there a different way
Yeah,
that
so
you're
the
approaching
survey is
this?
a yes, no, abstain. So we send it out with all of our policies, yes, no, abstain to each one. And then the city councilor or the county councilor or the mayor will say, okay, actually, I disagree with no homelessness week. That's a no for me. That no is weighted more than a no for the other policies.
Meaning it's gaining, like when you're doing your mathematical equations on the
Correct.
back end, it has a higher percent, like it's
Yeah. So let's
1.5 or
say like no
1.25.
homelessness week, if you say no, it's weighted like 1.5% more than if you say no. And actually we weight abstain as worse than a no.
Oh,
So
why is that?
because Wasatch Assembly, one of the things we want in spirit of what I've learned is that we actually want people who are opinionated, even if we disagree. I believe that dealing with somebody who's opinionated and vocal about that opinion is better than someone who's silent and you don't know what they believe. So we want people to say, nope, I hate no homelessness sweeps. And I'm like, well, I hate that and I don't like that you believe that. But at least you said that truthfully. And then abstain is, well, what do you believe?
So, who are some of your biggest abstainers?
So, interestingly, so we've only had two responses. Other people said they were going to respond, but we'll see what happens. So of the two, we had Chris Warren respond and Luke Maines respond. Both have gotten good grades. Chris Warren got a B plus and Luke got a B from the Wasatch Assembly. And Luke actually abstained more than Chris. So Chris got a better grade because he abstained less. And assumptions, like I said, can really weight you against. So Erica, I'm actually meeting with her today, Erica Carlson. She's the vice chair, I think, right now. I'm
And
meeting with
she's
her
Salt
today
Lake
and we're going to
County,
go.
Salt Lake
Hmm?
City District 5, right?
Yes. So
And
I'm meeting with
Chris Wharton
her,
is District 1 in the Avenues.
I believe, one or two.
And then where is Luke Maines?
Luke Maines is running for the Salt Lake County District 4. I should know this off
Okay.
the top, sorry. Um,
So, but what I'm trying to pick at here is we have talked pretty exclusively to this point about Salt Lake City Council. And it
yeah,
sounds like what y'all are working on now is expanding that outward to Salt
correct.
Lake
So
County Council.
yeah, our pilot year for this year, and actually we just completed our fundraiser of 7K, so yay. But
Oh,
our pilot year is
congratulations.
going to be Salt Lake City, Salt Lake County, and West Valley City. And those were voted on as well.
Ah, so in your assemblies, y'all decided which municipalities you wanted to target as well.
Correct.
Okay,
And then and also on
awesome.
the list was Bountiful, and then it was also Davis County, but those three won. So yeah, so it's like the idea is the Wasatch Assembly should be statewide, but on the municipal level. So just because you're a more conservative district doesn't mean we're not going to be there and advocating. So it's supposed to be a grassroots movement across the state.
Okay, so that's super interesting. And actually, that mirrors a lot of what, like, when you talk to democratic researchers, what they like to see and what they think creates a healthy democracy is this kind of grassroots from literally your neighbors up,
Right.
asking for what they want through coalitions and things of that nature. I want to go one by one through each of your
Okay.
policy positions. So I think no homelessness sweeps was your
Mhm.
number one
Correct.
policy.
Well, not so again, like I had my own vote, but
Mm,
that was number one for Wasatch Assembly. So I want to make
great.
a distinction. Like I, I don't necessarily disagree with this, but my number one was actually the property tax for homelessness, affordable housing, and homelessness services. So my number one wasn't no homelessness sweeps, but that is what the Wasatch Assembly voted to number one.
So let's start there then, since you care about that one the most. What is it? What are you proposing? How does it affect people?
So this is kind of at least what I've, because I'm a math girl. So I have a degree in chemistry, degree in math, and I think what I've observed, and Wasatch Assembly's foundation is anti-white supremacy, anti-patriarchy, anti-capitalist. So one thing, and again, I don't necessarily hate capitalism. It's just an economic theory someone wrote about, right? But what I don't like that's happening nowadays is this actually is happening in Glendale, and they have this no single family house movement actually happening in a neighborhood, which I don't necessarily agree with, but I understand the sentiment. They're building, townhomes on tiny plots of land that are going for $400 to $500,000. So I don't think that most people can afford that. And my issue with how we do development is there's always the need for profit. And that's not necessarily evil, but what it does do is it makes things inaccessible. If Salt Lake City Council or the county or any municipality levied a property tax, and let's say they did it to be so $50 million a year, or they could bond that to make it more. And then they just contracted an architect to make, kind of stock architectural plans, bought some land, and built either like apartment condos or apartment buildings, the rent for the apartment building would be so low because it would be paid for. The cost is upkeep, profit, right? And the upkeep, everyone pays $500 a month and then maybe a little bit extra, $700 a month. You don't need to pay that much because it's already paid for. So the other option is a condo, right? Let's say you build a condo, let's say 10% upcharge so that they can recuperate any maybe something took longer, it was more expensive. The condo would not be that expensive. It would be maybe $150,000, $200,000. So I think the issue I have is, and I don't know I don't have a spreadsheet of a construction company. I can't imagine it costs that much to make all those buildings. And just like from a logical standpoint, I'm like, okay, how much must it cost? They must be making at least 2x profit. So for me, if the city comes in, it's still working with private entities. It would be a private architectural firm and a private builder. Build the buildings, sell them for cheap, or do community land trust, and then have it in perpetuity be $500, $600, $700 a month with inflation. So I think that would, it wouldn't be the same scale of building, but I think it would start to show, hey, maybe we should put more money into this because now my kids can still live in the same neighborhood. Now I can afford a house.
Would you be putting a bond, like trying to put a bond on the ballot to get this accomplished?
So it could be, so the ballot, so a citizen ballot you're talking about, those take a lot of signatures. The first approach, at least for the Wasatch Assembly, is going to the city council and saying, do you guys agree? And then, kind of
Do they?
starting there. So Chris Wharton said yes to this one. But I think Luke Maines also said yes to this one too.
But you would
But
really need Alejandro Puy and Victoria Petro to be your main
we'll see if
proponents
they
for this.
respond.
And they, you said Ale Puy won't speak to you. What about Victoria? Is she speaking
Yeah,
with
we're in
you?
communication. So we have been closer, especially since the election with Stephen Otterstrom that she almost lost. I think that shifted some things. And she was more receptive to me after that. And then, Stephen later went on to win Sandra Holland's seat.
Was she more receptive to you personally or to your ideas with the Wasatch Assembly? Because I think that those are two very different things. Like you can be nice to someone and also prevent their
Correct.
political progress from happening. And I think that that's important to understand that distinction.
Open question on a second. First, personally, yeah, she's been nicer than me. She's met with me. We've talked. She said she's, somewhat supportive of Wasatch Assembly, but she hasn't responded to poll yet. So, again, it's
Okay.
like I'm kind of proofs in the pudding, and it's not saying that she hates Wasatch Assembly, but it's like we're asking politicians to say yes or no, and
And I think even more acutely, you're asking politicians to put their political futures on the line. If they put a bond on the ballot and it fails, that has potential political blowback, especially for someone like Petro and potentially Puy, who it is swirled that they maybe want to be mayor someday. So it's
mm,
like if you're advocating for this, I mean, I think a great example of this is they advocated really hard for a West Side high school, and that doesn't seem to be appearing. In fact, I think they're actually losing more schools. It seems like the elementary schools that were shut down or were slated to be shut down primarily were on the West Side, if I remember that correctly. So I think that's very interesting. I
yeah.
do think that this is an
Just for
interesting
correction, sorry, I want
idea.
to correct. Luke Maines abstained from the property tax. Chris Warren said yes. So I just wanted to, because I wanted to check because I didn't want to put them on
Yeah,
the record anymore.
we like being truthful and honest. That's great.
Right.
I think that there is something important here, though. What you're advocating for with this particular issue, which is to have the city pass a bond that taxpayers are paying into and agreeing to help pay down for, which then is utilized probably through union backed labor to build low to no cost or at cost with a little bit of 5 or 10% back to
Right.
the builder, which is lower than their average. On average, I think they take 15% plus cost. And then you're then saying that the city will own this property Is that correct? The city will
So,
own these
if it's a
buildings, or will they
condo,
be
it would be
purchased?
sold to the community, right? If it's a condo, it would be sold. But if it's a like an apartment building that's not going to be sold, it could be community land trust. Either the land the city owns still in the building's community land trust or community housing trust, or the city like gives the land to the community land trust and then they manage the building as well. So it could be, I'm not super opinionated on the details there. But it's more, the intention is just like not having a private owner who's going to jack up the cost to, fund their lifestyle, right? It's like you don't need, if you don't have someone, an owner who's looking for a profit, the cost is going to be lower.
And essentially, the point is that you're utilizing the city government as a way to act as that intermediary without
Right.
having a need to make a profit from the transaction.
Right.
That's interesting. Then your next one is no homelessness sweeps. What is a homelessness sweep, and why are you against them?
Yeah, so homelessness sweeps are, and I'm sure people have seen them where, there will be unhoused folks or homeless folks, just sitting down somewhere because they don't have a place to live. And then someone calls the cops or the cops see them and they say, you need to move, you can't be here. Or they have the tents or they have belongings and they're like, you can't have these, and they throw them all away. Right. So a sweep basically is just I guess like a sweep is pushing around the problem, right? Quote unquote. So why we're against it is because it's inhumane. What is the solution? You're just traumatizing people. My opinion, and this is not necessarily for the Wasatch Assembly, my personal opinion on this is people want this veneer of, oh, everything's great. Well, clearly our system is broken because there are people on the street who cannot get off the street. And there are other countries that have solved this, and we have not. And
What countries have solved homelessness?
I think a lot of the Scandinavian countries have low homelessness. China has low homelessness. Those are top of my head. And, both of those
But they
countries are
don't, sorry, just to be pointed here. It's not that they have no homelessness, it's that they have low homelessness. So they haven't necessarily solved this issue. Do you think that's fair?
I think that I think low I think to me low homelessness is closer to no homelessness than what we have. So I think that
That one we have here in Salt Lake City specifically, or throughout the entire United States? Sorry, I don't mean
both.
to keep cutting you
No,
off.
you're good. Both.
Both. Okay. Um,
Both. Right.
so I do think that it's fair to say that we all, I think, universally want safe, housed neighbors. And I guess one of the things that I struggle with, and I don't know what your thoughts are on this, but when I think about how we do that, without immediate indoor capacity shelter space available, which is really tough, and I know that the state has been experiencing this firsthand as they try and quote unquote solve Salt Lake City's homelessness problem.
Right.
How do you work and talk to people to address safety, sanitation, and reasonable sharing of public space concerns raised by neighbors and small businesses? I know that Liberty Park has dealt with some of this. Some in Glendale Park has dealt with some of this. Like, what are your responses to that?
So do you know Nomad Alliance? Are you familiar?
I've heard of them, but why don't you explain to us what they are and why they
Yeah.
matter?
So Nomad Alliance is a organization, a nonprofit, I believe, that or maybe they're not nonprofit. I'm not sure, but they, are basically supporting the in-house population in Salt Lake, but across the valley. And they have this blue bus that basically has showers, food, and is supportive of those folks who are on the street. And they actually gave a proposal to Salt Lake, which, Wasatch Assembly actually supports. We unanimously support it. It's called the Nomad Alliance Safe Parking Site. And it's utilizing city land to have a place where people can go spend the night in like a more regulated environment and get services directed towards them. I think that I don't have much empathy for people complaining about it, is what I'm going to say. Because, and this is a bit expansive for me. Um, I think what grinds my gears about this in particular in Utah is we're a Christ loving state. No? What would Jesus do? So would Jesus say, oh, they're on my property? So the hypocrisy is a bit too loud for me to give sympathy. So I understand, right? There's an unhoused man who walks down my street every day, stops in front of my house. Do I love? No, but do I want to call the police and do what? His condition is not going to change if I traumatize him further. So for me as a homeowner, the reality is the only way we're going to get out of this is if we support our community members with money. There is no pressure, brutality, sweeping, displacement that's going to solve this. And I think we need to get real with ourselves that it's going to cost something. And that's why, we have the no homelessness sweep as number one. The second one is expanding housing options. And the third one is property tax for affordable and homelessness services. Those three are our top priorities. It's not like one's more important. They all go in conjunction. So I feel that a lot of people in the local community need to get real and need to accept what is going on. And what is going on is people cannot afford housing. People are living in their cars. And that is not going to change if you call the police. The police are not a solution. They are a temporary stave on your sensibility.
Okay, I think that this particular conversation has so many doors we could open, and we have a very finite amount of time. I do want to say specifically, the one thing that I want to pick at just a little bit before we have to go here is that during the 2026 legislative session, the state legislature approved an additional $44 million to add into the broader homelessness fund that they're working on, which totaled to roughly 147 some odd million dollars. And one of the things that I thought was really striking that you said was that the way we're going to solve this is through more money. And I'm wondering, how much money do you need? That seems like quite a bit, but maybe it's not enough. And maybe, like, what am I missing here?
Yeah, I think what you're missing, or at least what I think you're missing, is that the money should not be going to nonprofits who are temporary solutions. What we need is housing built that is cheap. And when I'm talking cheap, I'm talking you can work part-time at McDonald's and afford the rent. I'm talking actually cheap, actually affordable, and you can be struggling to find a job. You can be between jobs. Because what does addiction do? What does trauma do? It is not giving stability. So you need places, and my ideal is homelessness services where they have this is another thing that Wasatch Assembly policy is called homelessness villages, where you have 1 to 2 bedrooms, private, allows for pets, allows for couples, is not super surveillance-y, allows people to get back on their feet, gives them a year or two, and then there's housing they can go into. That's $500 a month. So the reality is a shelter is burning money on a short-term solution, in my opinion. Again, I'm not an expert. So, would love the experts to chime in and say where I'm wrong here. But my impression is the shelter isn't solving anything.
Do you believe in a housing first approach, which is what?
Yeah, I guess so.
Great. Well, and I actually think it was very interesting, in the mid 20-teens, Utah was using a housing first model, and we were lauded on the national stage for having some of the lowest homelessness in the
Really? Okay, I didn't know that.
In the United States. And then there was a shift towards this, specifically in Salt Lake City, towards this more decentralized, they broke up the Rio Grande, which was like the centralized location, the hub. They tried to disperse it throughout the neighborhoods. There was a lot of neighborhood pushback that resulted in a pretty dramatic upheaval and change, I think, in the city council and in the mayor's office. And so then the state stepped in. And the state said, oh, we can solve this with a mega homelessness campus. And they put, Wayne Niederhauser in charge, who had previously been in various leadership positions amongst the state legislature. And he was like, oh, I can solve this in a couple of months. And what I think they've found is that over the last 2, maybe 3 years, my memory's a little murky there, they've, one, been unable to find a location to site this location campus.
Right.
Two, they have had to expend way more money than they initially expected to. And three, they've found that this kind of issue is particularly intransigent and difficult to solve. And so I think that that is just very interesting to me. So what I hear from you, I think, is what you're looking for and what the Wasatch Assembly is supporting is a more compassionate, more put someone in a house, more accept them as they are approach than
Yeah.
this kind of top down, police led punitive system. And
Right.
is that the shift is
Yeah.
that correct?
I think from an empirical level, like, I don't know. I think that when people like act like it's so common sense and realistic to be punitive, it's like, is it working? Like how, like the police budget for Salt Lake is expanded massively. Is it working? Right. So
Yeah.
I think that there's this assumption that like, well, the police budget needs to be bigger. And are they not wasting money? I think that like this conception that the police are the bomb, right? When the reality is the issue is our hearts. The issue is our inability to say, people like I want some of my money to go to a system that is going to give people housing and get people a second chance. I want a second chance if I fall off my high horse. I want a second chance and I want everyone to have a second chance. And I think the issue is not about punitive versus non-punitive, housing first versus non-housing first. It's about like, are we willing to give something up to care about the people around us? And that man who walks on my street every day, I'm willing to give up. And I calculated, I think it was probably like $20 in taxes for me extra a year. I'd give $20 up to help him. And I think the question is, why are no more people not willing to do that and not imagine a world where some little amount goes to something that's not in your control, but you still want that money to go? And I think the largest hypocrisy for me is literally, and I want to end on the, if we're ending here, is that Jesus gave the shirt off his back. Jesus fed people without cost. And this is the hub of LDS Church. And I think the hypocrisy, what I call white supremacist Christianity, is that it's not actually Christ. It's not. If it was Christ, we'd be giving our money to make sure no one's on the street, because that's what Christ did.
Okay. What a way to end. And thank you so very much. The last question that we ask all of our guests is, how are you finding joy in your life right now?
Hang out with my friends. I think that it's a hard time and I'm struggling to find joy. It's like the war in Iran. I was at the grocery store the other day and I was like, right? Like it's a hard time, but I think what gets me through is actually organizing. Even though it maybe doesn't seem fun, I think it makes me feel less lost. Like I'm doing something and that's the most I can do, right? I'm only one person and I am trying to push city council to care about us, right? So that is something. And in the other moments of life, it's going to the movies, it's hanging with friends, singing karaoke, um, and honestly, laying in my bed watching videos, watching TikToks and Instagram reels. Sometimes you got to be a lazy queen. So I think those are what's bringing me joy right now. So yeah.
I did lie. I do have one more question for
Oh,
you. If someone wants to get involved with the Wasatch
oh.
Assembly, how can they do so?
So everything is on our website, wasatchassembly.org. So you can go there. There's a sign up sheet. You can the sign up form. You can get on our email list. You can donate. Also, at the Wasatch Assembly on Instagram, you can click on in there and follow. And we post all our events. We have next week our first session of lobbying at Salt Lake County and Salt Lake City on Tuesday the 18th. Salt Lake County's at 1:30 and Salt Lake City's at, I believe, 7. So if you're interested, we're going to be talking about our immigration policies. So if you care about immigration, don't like what's happening with ICE, want to get more involved, that's where you can start pushing your representatives to represent you better in what you believe.
Great. Thank you so much, Canada.
Thanks.
And thank you for listening today. You can catch Around the Counter with Molly and Friends on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or Substack. We air on Sugar House Community Radio Sundays at 8 p.m. and Wednesdays at 7 a.m. See you next week.